big pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar that is in celebration of the World Refugee Day in 2021. It is a big pleasure to be today with an all-ladies panel moderated by Amina Khalid and by experts who are joining us from around the world. Before we are going to start, we want to send a specific message from the Network for Dialogue that is supported by the International Dialogue Center KAICIID, and 7 of its members have delivered a specific message that we want to share with you here right at the beginning of our webinar. Enjoy.
Tenemos que darles a las mujeres refugiadas y migrantes los espacios que se merecen como creadoras y transmisoras de la cultura que son, pero sobre todo tenemos que escucharlas y respetar sus tiempos y respetar sus agendas y no colonizar sus luchas.
Σε έναν κόσμο δυστυχώς γεμάτο μεγάλες ανισότητες και αδικίες, η μέριμνα και ο αγώνας μας μεταξύ άλλων πρέπει να είναι και η γυναίκα πρόσφυγας και μετανάστρια, ώστε ελεύθερα και χωρίς φόβο να μπορεί να εκφράζεται και να διεκδικεί όσα δικαιούται.
المرأة اللي عندها خلفية مهاجرة تتمتع بالتنوع، فمن الضروري واتجاه بلد مهاجر مثل ألمانيا تنحط بمركز القيادة مشان وقت عملية اتخاذ القرارات يتم اتخاذ القرارات بالتشاور معه ومو عنا.
Le paure nascono dal mistero di ciò che non conosciamo. Storie come quella di Amana, che ha dovuto lasciare la sua terra ma ha portato con sé la sua storia, le sue radici, la sua fede, ci richiede di ascoltare, condividere e lasciarci sorprendere per scoprire la nostra comune humanità.
Desde el Observatorio Blanquerna en Comunicación, Religió y Cultura,
ascoltem i promovem la veu de la dona migrant i refugiada
a través de la nostra feina fent recerca d'investigació a nivell local, nacional i internacional.
Sobretot ens preocupa la visibilitat de la dona als mitjans de comunicació.
I aquest és el focus de la nostra feina.
لازم يتم توفير البيئة الداعمة للسيدات من طالب الحماية الدولية، البيئة اللي تقدر خبراتهم ومعارفهم وتوفر لهم الفرص التعليمية والتدريبية اللي تخليهم يقدروا يعرفوا البلد المضيف بشكل أفضل علشان يشقوا طريقهم لحياة كريمة.
Αναγκαστικοί μετανάστες, δημιουργικές γυναίκες, παράδειγμα ανθετικότητας και δύναμη. Η οργάνωση Γέφυρες Τέχνης προωθεί τον διάλογο, ενισχύει και δημιουργεί μαζί με όλες τις γυναίκες και τις γυναίκες πρόσφυγες. Ας μην ξεχνάμε την ιστορία. Ας μάθουμε από αυτό. Μαζί μπορούμε να κάνουμε έναν καλύτερο κόσμο.
This was the 2-minute message from our Network for Dialogue members in different languages in order to show the diversity that we would like to celebrate as well today and in general, as it is the mission of the International Dialogue Center KAICIID to strengthen intercultural and interreligious dialogue. And it is a big pleasure now to introduce the moderator of today, Amina Khalid, who is the head of the Sustainable Communities Program at Initiatives of Change in the United Kingdom, and she's a Network for Dialogue member herself. Very quickly, Amina has a lot of experience in dialogue facilitation, mediation, communication, and conflict resolution, and has worked in different parts around the world already, from Africa to the Middle East, from Asia to Europe. And Amina herself lives truly and very passionately so to bring different people from all kinds of backgrounds together, may it be in the city where she is currently at, in London, to different parts around the world. And Amina is surely also a person who always actively speaks up for women issues as well, and we couldn't imagine a better person to moderate today's panel as such. Amina, thank you so much for moderating this panel today. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Johannes, for that warm and beautiful welcome. It is a real pleasure to be moderating today's webinar on behalf of Network for Dialogue and a representative of Initiative of Change's Sustainable Communities Program. Greetings to you all, and thank you so much for joining us on this special occasion in celebration of World Refugee Day, which is marked in the UN calendar each year on June the 20th. We are marking World Refugee Day for the second year against a backdrop of a dramatic global crisis. On one hand, record numbers of people are being forced to flee their homes. And on the other hand, the world is still grappling with COVID-19. Refugees and migrants, women are among the social groups most impacted by this crisis, as many of you know, and are suffering disproportionately from its social and economic consequences. They have been and continue to be what I call our sheroes, and not our heroes, but certainly our sheroes, frontline workers, holding families, communities and society together in these uncertain and challenging times. So we have designed today's webinar in order of these exceptional women under the topic of women on the front lines, the empowerment of female refugees and migrants for a socially inclusive Europe. Both the occasion and topic are very close to my heart. As a former refugee whose family was forced to flee from civil war and persecution, I witnessed lives, livelihood, and loved ones perished at such a young age. I still recall the ordeal my mother went through with her 5 children to reach safety on the European shores and rebuild a new life in Britain. In the midst of every crisis presents a unique opportunity, and today we have the opportunity and the honor with us to have 3 distinguished and diverse guest speakers from the field of social cohesion and women's rights who will address the challenges to social inclusion faced by women on the move, the actions taken to support them, and the importance of intercultural and interreligious dialogue. All of the speakers will focus their presentation on the following guided questions, which Johannes would kindly put up on the screen. And the allocation time would be 10 to 12 minutes with following a question and A. I would encourage you all to take the opportunity and think of possible questions and put them in the chat as you hear our inspiring contributors. We will have 30 minutes or so at the end to respond to as many questions as possible, of course, within the time frame that we have together with us this afternoon. So without further ado, let's start with our first speaker, Dr. Salome Mbugua, who is the Commissioner for Human Rights and Equality Commission, the co-president of the European Network of Migrant Women, and a full bio of hers will also be on the chat, as Johannes will provide. And equally, the same goes out to all the speakers. Dr. Salome, welcome. You're on mute, we cannot hear you.
Sorry about that. I'm always doing that. So thank you, Amina, and thank you, the KAICIID Dialogue Center and the organizers of today's conference. Indeed, it's very timely that we talk about the refugees, and in particular, the issues that are facing refugee women and girls on the move. As you've heard, actually, you know, our organization, European Network of Migrant Women, we are based in Belgium, Brussels. And we are a migrant women-led feminist platform that advocate for the rights, freedoms, and dignity of migrant, refugees, and ethnic minority women and girls in Europe. Our membership is diverse, which include women from almost all regions of the globe and extend to over 50 grassroots advocacy groups in over 23 European countries. And so we've been working on a huge range of issues within our own network. We have actually also been linking up with the women who are still tied in other refugee camps, for example, in Africa and other places. And we continue to hear of challenges that are facing, in particular, lesbian women in refugee camps. We are also very much challenged in recent years in terms of elderly refugee women and the challenges that specifically face them. Most of the time, they are forgotten. In my presentation to you today, I'll answer the 3 questions that has been sent and that have actually already been displayed on the board. So there are so many challenges that we cannot even continue to discuss them today, but I will highlight on the key major ones that still face refugee women and girls and women on move. And one of them is actually the social and cultural adaptation to the new environment when the women and the girls arrive to their country of destination. Language indeed continue to be a huge problem and a challenge, as most of the people would not have the language of where they end up in their country of destination in Europe. And so it actually determines their determination to engage with the rest of the community or to integrate into the community. And so sometimes they are isolated or excluded completely from the rest of the society. Navigating the system, they're not used to the usual, knowing where everything is. And even for them accessing services in terms of health, in terms of even shopping or anything that they want to do could be also very problematic. And it's important that they are helped to adapt into the new community where the refugees end up in. But still the social and cultural aspect has continued to face so many migrant refugees and women and girls actually. The second key major problem that we have identified within the network is the whole situations of the legal and policies that we have into place. And these include the immigration legal laws and policies that we have, because we know for sure immigration status of each woman determine on how they're included into the society and how they integrate into the society. We still find discriminative laws which limit women access and support. In particular, for example, in Ireland, we have the application of the habitual residency, that even if it's a woman who is experiencing violence, they cannot be able to get access to support because of the public use of the public funds, where they are still not being able to access that because they are excluded from that. Also, the whole issue of the independent status of women, in particular women who are experiencing violence, that the status of women is actually dependent on their spouses who is a man. And so if that man is the violent man within the relationship, then it will be very problematic and very difficult for that woman to be able to leave that relationship. These indeed policies and legal point of view, they need to be looked into because they still continue to tie women into bondage of exploitation. You end up seeing women ending up into prostitution or other survival mechanism to be able to survive or to hide themselves with fear of deportation. The third point is on economic empowerment of women, refugees, and migrant women. Indeed, this is a huge one within the whole of Europe, where we find that women end up in getting into jobs which do not match their qualifications. There's still a lot of discrimination when they're trying to access the labor market. There's also lack of recognitions of foreign qualifications that they come up with, and so many other issues that still remain there. So most women are vulnerable and they are actually not able to access the labor market. We do also have other situations of challenges, including the health needs of migrant women and girls, need to cope with separation, need to cope with loss and trauma at the same time. And most of them don't get this support, in particular to address trauma. Depression, anxiety, sleeping disorder. In my own organization, for example, in Akidwa, we have developed a project which we had to remask because many people don't want to be tied with the word mental health. So we call our project Let's Talk. And this is actually a psychosocial support kind of a project that we have in place to support the project itself. We also find in the area of health, access to services, in particular the reproductive health, is problematic and can be very much challenging for women who do not have the language, or women who are actually not able to access because they do not have what we call the medical card to access this. Again, in our organization, we have been lucky to get financial support to be able to work with women who are living in accommodation centers for women seeking international protection in the country. And on top of that, we actually do provide what we call the cultural competency kind of support and services to the key service providers to be able to support women in a meaningful way. Additionally, in recent time, in my organization, we have come up with a specific project because we realized that some women have to negotiate with their partners or their husband into the access and use of contraceptive. And so we have come up lately with an additional program that is actually targeting men and talking about the issues of sexual behavior, crisis pregnancy, issues of HIV and AIDS, and also issues of consent, because it's also very important. It's important that we develop mechanism towards combating the lack of access to employment, because this actually help women. If they get employment, it improves the sense of the worthiness, usefulness. It's key to integration and to meet other people and make an income, also help people to advance. So we have actually, for example, in my organization, trying to work with the local authority to support some of the women to engage in employment. We've also looked into corporate world, where organization KAICIID is working with the PEPO, maybe people know PEPO. So they're working with KAICIID to provide a project called Dot Work, where they are supporting women with mentoring, job placement, career coaching, and all this to help them to get into the labor market. We've also noted that most of the women want to do the care work, mainly because here in Ireland, it's the most accessible job that they can find. And it's the most marketable for now, because there are a lot of opening into that caring work, even though they're highly qualified. But again, most women find it easy for them because it's flexible and they can work around the hours based on their children. So it's important to work with corporate world. And in KAICIID, we've been trying to work with a corporate world, the people and the local authorities, in particular, to help the women. In terms of languages and as part of the best practice, we've had conversation sessions with Irish Indigenous women to have those conversations with the new coming refugee women, so that they can improve their way of communication and actually getting to learn and understand the English language. We've also been working with the different women from different backgrounds. For example, we have a woman providing Arabic speaking sessions with women refugees who are just arriving into the country. And this is actually getting from the women, empowering the women and building the capacity of the women who are already in our own network to be able to support these services that are needed by all these other women. As you can see also, and from our website, from ENOM, European Network of Migrant Women, we have so many projects that are up there to support women who are trying to access the labor market. We have a project called MOM, and this is actually to help women with their children to come and access training that can help them to be able to learn about their rights to work and how they can access the labor market, how they can prepare for their CVs, and how they can actually, prepare themselves for the job interviews when they come. Representation, of migrant women, and in particular of refugees, representing their voices and where they're coming from, have been problematic. And it's still a challenge, for most of the women to be able to be given the opportunity to speak for themselves and what they have gone through. So we still need to be able to help these women to be able to speak for themselves and to be able to tell their stories. It's also healing, and it can help them to overcome trauma. And with this, sometimes we try to work with the local authorities as well, because they are the ones who are providing for the services. And finally, in terms of the interreligious dialogue, to intercultural dialogue and interreligious dialogue, it's very important. We work with women from different faith background and religious background. And actually what we have done in KAICIID, for example, we came up with a project called Engaging Men and Religious Faith to actually help us improve our work, for example, on domestic violence, on supporting women to be able to disclose some of the issues that are going on. And we have found that working with interfaith religious from different groups and organizations have helped actually people to have better understanding of different faiths and where people are coming from. And it has also helped them to understand them more and their issues. We also know that, for example, the faith leaders are very influential in their own groups or in their own community. So we know it's very important, and we have tried to work with them in my organization to work in this. Finally, before I finish, I just want to give 3 key pointed things that I want to conclude with. So we have all these issues surrounding migrant women and girls who are on the move or who are already in Europe, as refugees. But really, we seriously need to look into the policies, the legal framework, and the strategies that we have to support migrant women and refugees, we really need to support them in a meaningful way. But our policies determine quite a lot on how we support them. Whether it's to put them into safety and security, we really need to review and amend our policies in the whole of Europe to be able to support these women in a meaningful way. We also need research and statistics as form of disaggregated data to inform our work and policies on how to address the gaps and issues that are still continue to affect women, refugees, and migrants when they end up in Europe or still when they're on the move. Representation and participation is key and will help actually women to live a meaningful life and viable life that it's not a token, but that is meaningful for them. Opportunity, and really not just talking about what they have gone through. Opportunity is the most important thing that we can give refugees, women and girls, to help them grow and advance. Thank you.
Wow, what a wonderful way to start the session. Thank you very much, Dr. Salome. Very insightful, and seeing how very busy that you and your team are on the ground, and really hearing about some of these practical, simple steps, but sometimes seem to be quite hard to take on. And some of the issues that you highlighted are really bringing back home also a lot of the issues that's happening in London, so to speak. I mean, domestic violence is on the rise and has been so since the pandemic. And I think that's something that most of us could certainly relate to, whether women or not. And then on the other side, you talked about what it meant to be someone of a migrant and refugee background and the challenges that comes with that. And certainly, once again, from a personal and professional level, is something that I have both experienced and witnessed. And certainly, language barriers play a critical role in dividing people and creating a misunderstanding. Just simply, one is not able to communicate in the language that others can understand, and really emphasizing what that means in terms of the context of education and integration. So thank you for also shedding a light on that. And also finally, just very encouraged to hear about the importance of meaningful ways of engagement, and that's really important. I often ask myself the questions around whether policymakers are really on board of what it means from a grassroots level of engaging with people in a meaningful way that can really connect and can build trust. So thank you very much. So we are now moving on to our next guest speaker. I've got the pleasure to invite Miss Anila Noor, who is the Policy Advisor on Diversity, Integration and Gender Inclusion, and a member of the expert group on the views of migrants in the field of migration, asylum and integration. A full bio is also on the chat for your reference. A warm welcome to you, Ms. Anila Noor.
Thank you, Amina, and thank you so much for having me here. It's such a pleasure to share this panel with so brave women and amazing leaders. Before starting my input, I just imagine, close your eyes for a few seconds and thought about what you imagine about refugee women. What kind of image come to your mind? I can bet you will see women who are in need with so many children, women who are crying, women who are feeling lost. And within this second, if I say, okay, now imagine a powerful woman leader, who will you see? I'm pretty much sure these women are mostly not from the migrant background. This is the whole point I want to raise today. When we are talking about refugee women in the policy in Europe, we think women are vulnerable. And that's the thing we are trying to change. As I'm coming from a forced migration background, myself, I'm a refugee woman, and I'm saying I'm a resilient woman. I'm a feminist, I'm a leader. I'm trying to challenge these all stereotypical images of migrant women taking as a dependent in Europe. Brought up and raised up in Pakistan as a fourth girl child, when I was in my teenage, I already felt I do not have any opinion to share in my family decision. I do not have any voice. I do not have right to choose which and how and where I can get education. I have to be dependent, mostly from my family members. And being a fourth girl child, I felt unwanted. My society give me and say I'm a burden, and I become activist for women's rights. Due to uncertain reason, in 2015, when we claimed political asylum and moved to Netherlands and become a refugee, I felt the same, and it was so strange, and I was so still disappointed. Now we are in our developed countries, Europe, which say we are ambassadors of human rights, we are ambassadors of gender equality, but in reality, no. The reality was so different. I faced so much difficulties. I'm still facing so much challenges to bring gender equality, inclusion in Europe. This is the reason why I became refugee in 2015. I start a campaign, a movement, nothing about us without us. I joined so many global level refugee-led initiatives. When I become refugee and my assigned municipality send me to work in a factory, regardless of my 3 master degrees, regardless of my experience, they just think I can only contribute to the labor market in a factory. This is the disappointment we are keep witnessing, we are keep experiencing. Our knowledge is not knowledge. Our lived experience is just hidden and under the barriers. It's becoming more invisible. Then I said no, I will not gonna give it up again. And I started from the scratch. Similar like in Pakistan. I made my own ways. I was lucky enough, I was educated, I'm resilient, and I show my resistance and I look for a job. And same year when I was assigned a work in a factory, I become ambassador of Open Society Foundation. I become fellow. I become policy advisor for City of Amsterdam, and same year I become part of European Migrant Advisory Board. From that day till today, I never look back because this is the responsibility I put on my shoulder. I want to be involved in the policies. I really want to show the really visibility of refugee and migrant women that they are new role models. They are resilient and they are trying to hold not only their own culture, but also how they are trying to contribute in their new home, which are Europe. This is very important when we are talking about integration, labor market, when we are talking about women, we always think about them as a second thought. So far in migrant policy in Europe, they are not trying to include them as they deserve. They are becoming more dependent. And pandemic show us there's a high rate of gender-based violence, less gender-sensitive response to COVID, and even vaccine. If you see, there are hardly any result data who really trying to understand what will the vaccine impact of females. And when it's come to the women, girls, people from the color, they are becoming more and more vulnerable. Not because they are vulnerable, but system making them vulnerable. That's why, as a part of New Women Connectors, with our refugee migrant-led movement, we are trying to take the seat on the table as a co-creator, as a co-design person, not as a passive receiver of policies. I felt so much privilege to talking about in a high-level discussion like today. But the thing is that they are so long journey. There are so many women who are stuck in the system. They don't know what to go. They have abusive husbands at home, and if they go out, there are hardly any cities or institution who are helping them. Being living in Netherlands still, I'm receiving messages on a personal level. Women who want to get divorced, who want to get independent, who want to get new job, who want to get new opportunities. There are hardly any opportunity. There are hardly any information. As you heard from my earlier panelist colleague, she also referred the similar. Europe becoming more and more complex. Women from the migration background, either they're refugee They are migrant, they are asylum seeker, they are stateless, they are undocumented. They are becoming more and more dependent. They are becoming more and more in the problem, and the barriers is getting more rise because of COVID. There are less opportunity for them. Last year when COVID hit, we launched our digital campaign, Leading Resilience, as you can see in my background. It was very simple. We just provided a digital platform of virtual reality to help migrant refugee women to come together and to talk in their mother tongue, regardless if they are in Germany or in France or in Netherlands or in Portugal, but they will give them the facilitation, confidence that this is their right to talk about it. This is their right to talk in their mother tongue. Where they feel safe and they can talk and they can identify what is problem according to them and what is solution they are looking for. We hold this kind of virtual gathering in Spanish, in Arabic, in Urdu, in Punjabi, in Farsi, and the result was amazing. You know, if I go as a woman, as a policy advisor to any migrant woman, and if I say, let's come to us discuss about policy, and she will say, what policy? Why? What the hell I want to talk about with you policy? But in reality, when we say, okay, can you share about your life, how you are facing, how you are doing about your children's education, are you finding any job, what kind of problems you are doing, she will reflect and identify the gaps of because of policy she is facing. This is the confidence we are trying to give, like how they can understand the challenges and where they can reflect. At New Women Connected and other migrant and refugee-led initiatives I mentioned I'm part of, and I'm also part of European Commission's expert group, we are reflecting these views on the table to them. But the thing is that still, from migration background, as a representative of this community, we felt there is a distance. Because of COVID, it's become more, the distance, the gap become more. So we have been just invited into the set design agendas, set design events, set design stages. We really want to co-design. We really want to co-develop these approaches, these policies. Either they are integration, they are education, they are to bring inclusion and integration in Europe. We really need to bring gender lens and intersectional lens. It's really important. And especially I'm talking about those people who have the resources, because integration is expensive. It requires your investment. And if you want to change your Europe, you really want to invest. Recent strategies, especially for gender equality strategy and other strategy being announced, they are very much good. But the thing is that when you unpack them and the implementation process start, it gets more blur, it gets more shaky. And we as a representative, we are trying to be collaborate and to give them feedback, either it's working or not. So we can diagnose where is a problem and how we can transfer this all policy from paper to reality. And my your last question, I will say intercultural dialogue. This is the part we are doing as a refugee and migrant woman in Europe, coming from different countries, born in different countries and born in culture. We are doing this. And I always think about diversity and intercultural dialogue, just like we created and we said rainbow principle. Just imagine like rainbow is diverse, rainbow all colors, they are beautiful and they are independent. And this is the beauty we want to bring in Europe. We really want to bring this feminist lens, ecosystem where we understand independent life and respect to each other. The dignity element is so important. We really want to be an engineer, doctors, policymakers. We know how to cook. We love to cook. But migrant women don't only want to cook, they really want to cook the policy and the future of Europe. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Ms. Anila Noor, for that inspiring contribution. And your presentation comes with so much warmth and so much truth and hitting home some of the very thing that many of us women are experiencing right now as we speak. Thank you very much for that. I love the fact that there's so much emphasis on not just the pain, but also the beauty that comes with that pain, with your first introduction of what happens when you close your eyes, what do you see? And yes, I personally saw pain, but I also immediately saw the courage and the beauty and the wisdom and the resilience that come with it, especially as far as the contribution of women from the migrant and refugees are concerned. So thanks for that. And the vulnerabilities and what that does, actually, we all need to really let go and to be vulnerable. And I think that's the best way to really connect from, one heart to another. And you certainly done that. Also, the importance that you really emphasize on inclusion and gender equality, and the fact that it's actually very important to hold on to your own culture, because you would agree with me that many women absolutely feel quite fearful in holding on to that culture because of integration issues, and actually being able to educate women, girls around what that means, being able to know your culture, to hold on to your culture, but also to find ways to integrate so that you're able to really use the best of both worlds and to go out in confidence. So that was really something that I'm going to hold on to and remember. And also that it's actually, the system that's failing and what it means to the need for us in order to change that. So thank you very much. So we now have our last but certainly not least speaker, and I have an absolute honor to introduce you to Yadviga Kirdzik, who is the program manager at the International Catholic Migration Commission in Jordan, where she manages the ICMC Protection, Livelihood and Humanitarian Assistance multi-donor programs. Her bio is in the chat box. Please, I urge you once again to remind that you really take this opportunity to send your questions if you haven't done so already, so that by the time we finish hearing the wonderful contribution of Yadviga, that we really can delve into some interactive conversation with our wonderful panelists and hear of your inspiring questions and hear their contribution. So a warm welcome to you. Over to you, Yadviga.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be invited to be able to share my experience working and serving refugees, migrants, and vulnerable communities. I will try to address these 3 questions based on my experience in a different part of the world, as I'm sitting here now in Jordan. So particularly work in the Middle East and focus with Jordan with International Catholic Migration Commission, ICMC. In terms of challenges, vulnerable women and young girls, refugees and migrants here in Jordan and a wider Middle East region experience fear, stress, anxiety, isolation, lack of access or limited availability to basic services, including shelter, health, education, livelihoods opportunities, lack of documentation and legal status, and often as a result revert to negative coping strategies, including child marriage and being subjected to violence and abuse. One of the main challenges, as I mentioned, is economic, because as you know, economic inclusion is path for social inclusion, and women experience reduced participation in the labor market, like previously mentioned by Dr. Salome. Most of female refugees and migrants are limited to the domestic setting. Unfortunately, the lack of opportunities to engage with the host community members, learn about cultural and legal aspects of life here in Jordan, establish a safety net, and thus, of course, integrate. Conditions are also not favorable. There is a stigma attached, there are inflexible working hours, and lack of childcare services. And only 5% of female Syrian refugees have work permits. ICMC's most recent multi-sectoral needs assessment highlighted the financial hardship of vulnerable refugee and Jordanian households, which is made worse by COVID-19 pandemic and the consequent negative impact of poverty and high level of stress on the well-being, especially for children. Increased tensions, as mentioned previously in the households, have caused a 14% increase in intra-family violence. Socioeconomic crises associated with long periods of social isolation have drastically impacted women and young girls' well-being. Another aspect is the role of education in ending the marginalized status of female refugees and migrants. There is a lack of educational opportunities for female refugees and migrants, and mainly due to the high educational costs. Destitute refugees and migrants cannot afford universities' fees, especially here in Jordan, and dropping out of school or not following up with higher education contribute to the overall marginalization, confinement to the household, and can potentially be linked to early marriage, which imposes several, of course, new barriers to full participation in society and social inclusion. Finally, lack of rights, except of, for example, UN UNRWA registered Palestinian refugees, unequal rights to host community members within Jordanian citizenship constitutes a barrier for female refugees and migrants to work several professions, access educational opportunities, and government support. It forces them to compete against each other, and most vulnerable host community members for low-wage jobs, thus creating divisions. The settling and integration process is far from easy due to Jordan's struggle to adequately address both the pre-existing vulnerability of the host population and of those who have been displaced. Slide 3, please. In terms of what is done to support female refugees and migrants to approach the integration, here in ICMC Jordan, we adapt our programs through understanding and analyzing vulnerable family needs. When we talk about migrants and refugees and displaced persons, often we stop at statistics, but it is about real people, as we all know, and we encounter them, we will get to know them much more. And knowing their stories, we'll be able to understand them and their challenges they face. I'll tell you briefly just one of the stories about Sarah's family and her small children and another baby on the way, who was seeking refuge in Jordan after moving from one shelter to another in Syria. Upon their arrival in Jordan, it was difficult to find a proper shelter. And unfortunately, her child was born with a heart condition as a result of extreme stress and malnutrition experienced by mother, and later unfortunately died. The loss of the child came as a shock to the family, and Sarah's husband could no longer work properly, sustain his family despite working 2 jobs. In an effort to introduce a sense of normalcy to their lives and support her husband in securing a livelihood for their family, Sarah decided to find a job. Sarah heard about ICMC's livelihood courses and decided to register in order to boost her chances of finding a better paying job. She completed a tailoring course, which is one of the activities of our ICMC livelihoods program, and received a certificate in the end, in addition to a sewing machine and the necessary tools she will need to start her career. She said, thanks to ICMC, I was able to rise up and help my family to overcome the loss of our child. Though I'm still in the beginning of my career, doing mainly repairs for the local ladies, I hope my career will pick up so that I can support my family better. Sarah added, in the same way ICMC has helped me, I'm trying to help my husband to overcome his loss through teaching him to sew. And I hope one day he will be able to open successful sewing workshop for ourselves. This is, of course, just one example how ICMC supports families providing vocational training courses and linking individuals like Sarah to job opportunities. Slide 4, please. To support female refugees and migrants to proactively approach the integration, ICMC Jordan also provides psychosocial and counseling support to women and girls experience more complex protection needs through both individual and group counseling sessions. Also, gender and age-sensitive structured learning and recreational activities for girls and boys in our child-friendly spaces. Arabic and literacy classes for women and girls equip them with the skills needed to participate and advocate for their own protection. Through obtaining basic literacy and language skills, women are able to contribute decision-making within their household, feel more confident in approaching other service providers, and claim their rights. We also provide life skill courses specifically aimed at women and girls who were married as a child and who are at risk of entering a child marriage. In terms of empowering young girls with the objective of improving the confidence, self-esteem, and the resiliences of young girls, These peer-to-peer groups generate safe spaces where young girls can discuss issues affecting them and their communities to mitigate feelings of boredom, hopelessness, social isolation, depression, and anxiety. We provide protection intergenerational groups, which brings young people and older individuals together, promoting social cohesion, skill sharing, and therefore reducing social isolation. These groups encourage dialogue between older and younger generations and facilitating exchange of knowledge and enhance community support beyond the duration of our program. We provide also positive parenting activities to support mainly mothers and caregivers in developing safe and nurturing environments for their children and promoting healthy family relationship. Finally, in terms of integration activities, we established local community committees who will collectively raise awareness on protectionism in their communities. The engagement of both refugees and migrants and host community members in local community committees is simultaneously an opportunity to combat deeply entrenched gender inequality and stigma around matters such as disability and mental health, and build solidarity by bringing together individuals from different national cultural backgrounds to exchange ideas, learn from each other, establish mutually respectful relationship as members of the same community. Slide 5, please. To address economic exclusion, ICMC Jordan also provides multi-purpose cash to assist refugees and migrants to meet their basic needs as a result of their socioeconomic vulnerability and to mitigate a protection incident or situation. We also provide cash for rent assistance for families, which are designed to enable families to access adequate housing and decrease protection risk. Slide 6, please. In terms of role of key stakeholders such as government, organizations, community leaders should benefit from learning and working together to build stronger communities. Open dialogue and constructive discussion are a first step in approaching competition for resources, for jobs, cultural differences, and discrimination. However, as we know, this alone is not enough. Government organizations should consult the communities and develop a strategic plan that fosters prosperity and equality among the different social groups, making the necessary adjustment to legal framework and dedicating funded, of course. Community leaders are key in fighting discrimination, extremist views on gender, religion, politics, and in building common grounds among local community members. Holistic interventions are very much needed. The outbreak of COVID-19 has exacerbated competition of the labor market and vulnerabilities, thus, of course, increasing tension in the household and outside through interaction within the wider community. A recovery plan must consider the intersecting, competing needs of the different social groups and changes in the current social legal frameworks necessary to make way for strong social cohesion and integration. Slide 7, please. It's the last point. Regarding contributing to a more social inclusive society. Through intercultural dialogue, members of local communities can address cultural tensions, segregation, discrimination, stereotypes. It is also crucial to preserve the identity of minorities, as there is a wide cultural view which assumes, sadly, that all refugees and migrants from certain countries of origin have the same cultural background. Government and multilateral agencies must invest in awareness raising and comprehensive initiatives through schools, media, and integration projects. Intercultural education is a starting point for the development of intercultural competences and social cohesion. The mandate of ICMC is to serve people of full faith, cultural and national backgrounds, gender, age, and ability without discriminating and completely separated from the will to condition to potentially impose any religious agenda. Thank you. I'll be available for any questions at the end.
Thank you very much for that thought-provoking and insightful contribution, Ms. Yadviga. I'll be very surprised if our participants don't have questions after hearing that incredible but also very practical, both highlighting the challenges but also the opportunities and ways forward. So very much appreciated. Once again, for those who wondered, there we have the European context, which we'd heard both from Dr. Salome and Anila Noor, and then here we have the Jordanian context. Well, needless to say that we are now more interconnected than ever before. And whilst our contexts may be very different, our challenges in many ways aren't. And certainly Ms. Yadviga had reminded us of that, where, you know, domestic violence is very much present wherever you are in the world. And it was really interesting to hear the context in Jordan, and also some of the services that are available and that especially your team are making available in order to overcome that, especially the psychosocial and counselling support, which you have highlighted, a very important aspect of enabling and empowering women to cope with the challenges and the trauma that they face. And also, I loved the aspect on the youth empowerment and planting the seeds at such an early age, you know, where they are able to not only learn, but also to adapt and to work across generation. Again, something that's very close to my heart, cross-generational work. So that was very encouraging to hear on your part as well. And also around the mental health and what it means, you know, to support individuals with that, whilst there's so much stigma attached to it. And we know that those, especially from certain parts of the communities or different religious backgrounds, that mental health is still very much a taboo, whether you're in Europe or back home. And there's very little conversation. And now all of a sudden we are forced to talk about that, because if we don't, then we know that the situation is going to get worse. So thank you very much for that. Well, all three wonderful speakers have certainly given us much food for thought, and there's been lots of questions flowing around. Thank you very much, Johannes, for forwarding that to me. We've got just over half an hour, and so we'll try and get through it as many as possible. So let us begin by some of the first questions we received. So 2 questions came. Anila mentioned that she wants to become involved in policy, but we know that many female refugees and migrants are not heard. So the question is, what spaces is necessary to give a voice that is also heard by politicians? And secondly is to Dr. Salome. Dr. Salome talks about the meaningful opportunities. How can that be achieved? And how can the barriers be overcome? So let us start off with these 2 questions.
Yes, thank you for this important question. Yes, it is very important. As mentioned from last few years, that's what we are trying to do. We are trying to give them platform to refugee and migrant, especially women, to be part of this discussion. And on the beside, we are also trying to give the advocacy and sensitization, you know, how we can engage as a meaningful participation in the policy debate, because we really need to avoid the tokenization, need to avoid the exploitation and the reproduction of exploitation. So that's why we are trying. And before pandemic, it was we were supported by, as I just saw in the chat, and I just remember it was first ever event we had in Brussels in 2020 in January, sponsored by and hosted by European Council of Europe, and also by Commission. They always help us to generate and invite refugee and migrant women, because we, as a led by refugee and migrant women coming from different background, we always face the challenge. Like they think we are not contributing in the policy, or we do not understand. My engagement, my personal experience, and all the network we are working with as a collaborator, we really want to create a solidarity, a work where we can give the feedback of the policies, because this is very important. And before new pact of migration, what we did, we unpack the consultation world, and we give feedback from the communities by helping them in Arabic, Urdu, and Spanish, and they give the feedback to the Commission when they were planning for the new pact of migration. So this is the thing, but the thing, it requires resources, is required how we can make preparedness for the community and also the policymaker, because sometimes policy making so much jargon, different terms and different languages, it's become difficult to understand for the people or for the migration background. It does not mean they are not capable or they do not understand, but the thing is that how we can create a synergy. This is very important, and it's like ongoing, it's very complicated, and pandemic make it more difficult.
Thank you. And
yeah.
Dr. Salome, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And actually just to add into what Noah is saying, and it's important actually to emphasize on the importance of having refugee and migrant being involved in civic and democratic participation. So they do not only inform, but they are part of drawing those policies and strategies, and also becoming politicians, contesting for to be actually elected into those offices and being on the table with those decision makers or politicians themselves. It's very important that the migrant community, in particular refugees and asylum seekers and refugees, are offered those opportunities. I just want to say that as a commissioner for Irish human rights myself, I had to contest for this post, and it's actually it's a public body that advises the state and takes into issues of human rights and equality into the country. And I'm the first actually migrant woman, African migrant woman, to be in this position. So it's important that also we step into those spaces, and it's also important for us to be given those opportunities as well to be able to do so, not just to inform and inform, but to be part of those who are drawing at the same time. In terms of accessing, giving meaningful opportunities, I think, and Noah actually said it at the beginning, most of the people empathizes quite a lot with refugees, migrants, but they don't want to give them opportunity. And so what we are asking for is to be granted opportunities and not empathy every time. Who are refugees, and actually, Dr. Noah, I'm calling you doctor now. You actually asked us to close our eyes, and you gave us all these examples, of who do people imagine refugees are and migrants are. They are educated people, they are professionals, they are lawyers, they are accountants, they are what you would want to name it. It's actually giving them those opportunities to participate equally into a country wherever they are, to be able to shape the future, being the people who are not only doing jobs that doesn't matches their qualifications, but they are afforded the opportunity to work. We know in most countries there's a lot of discrimination and racism, and we have to name it that way. If we don't, we are not going to go beyond the song of the refugees are hopeless, they are this and that. We really have to be able to afford people the opportunity to be able to, to be able to better themselves and to be able to contribute meaningfully with the qualifications that they have, with the knowledge, with the expertise. In terms also of, creating those opportunities, we have NGOs and organizations that just want to help migrants, help. We also have many other organizations that they just want to help migrants and refugees as volunteers. But when jobs come, they don't want to employ them. What we are asking for is that empathy to come to an end. Okay, it can be worked in parallel, but you also have to offer the people the opportunity. It's not just, ticking box and taking them as tokens. It's actually contributing to them, bringing them to contribute into a meaningful life by offering them the same opportunities as we would want for ourselves. So it's applying that human rights approach and perspective generally to everyone who is actually able to do so.
Thank you, Dr. Salome, and thank you for also emphasizing on the aspect of human rights and how that really comes into the conversation as we look at some of these challenges and what it means to overcome, especially if we are to make changes that we really need to step up to the plate and be courageous enough to make those changes that we've been speaking about today. Thank you. So I have a question. We have a question for Ms. Yadviga, and because you mentioned intercultural dialogue, does ICMC work with Muslim organizations which are active in Jordan?
Thank you for the question. Yes, ICMC working with all organizations, regardless if it's faith-based organization or not, and of course Muslim, because here we're in Jordan. So we're working, particularly in our strategy, we're trying and in line with the localization agenda, we're working with a community-based organization, national actors, and of course international organization supporting women refugees and migrants on different aspects. It's also part of it, especially with the local Muslim agencies. We're working to strengthen their capacity in particular areas. For example, we're trying to apply for joint funding to assist these really vulnerable communities. And as a result, also strengthens the capacity in different aspects for them to be able to support the local population.
Very interesting, and equally, I see, you know, your drawing aspect of similar approaches that is used in some of the contexts that we highlighted today, and then here you are also active within that line, but also working with the faith leaders who are based on the ground. So thank you for that.
Just to add, if it would be interesting. Part of our integration activities is establishing local communities, which I have mentioned previously. And the members are very often, sometimes it could be sheikh or different faith leaders. So as a result, it is part of the creating, as I mentioned, about creating social cohesion, about integration, and bringing different people from different backgrounds and walks of life together.
Indeed, and that kind of very much beautifully connects to the second question that I was going to put forward, and that's the level of acceptance in relation to policy. So what is the level of acceptance of the policy makers as regard to your advocacy in addressing women, refugees / migrant women, and how well is it integrated into their policies as well as their implementation?
Well, very big and difficult question, and very complex. As I mentioned in my first intervention, there's been involvement of from refugee and migrant is always they're invited to be part of different events, to be part of this kind of occasion when we have talking about inclusion and gender. But unfortunately, we still not feeling part of designing. We are not feeling part of this discussion, and that seat on the table is just always set. It's not like we are co-creating whole agenda. So it's still very much away. And as Salome also mentioned, there's a systematic racism, systematic inequalities, and so hidden, overlooked barriers, which we need to unpack, because Europe is becoming more and more complex countries, because there are so many different elements when we talk about Europe. And sometimes I feel more disappointed. Like if I am coming from South Asian culture, and always we can say, okay, because of economical reason, because of religion, or because of culture, we have this kind of some kind of limitation. But it's Europe, and we have so many opportunity, and we are talking about inclusion, and it's already 2021, and still we are talking about equality. We are talking about social justice. Still we are talking about the human rights, very basic human rights. It should be our right, but still we are trying to give the understanding like how we can be engaged and to really to contribute as a partner, as allies, not as a passive receiver, not as a beneficiary. This is the element we need to change. And as political participation, civic engagement, to be see as a European, it takes so much long way to go. So we can say, okay, we are European, but the question is, oh, who you are, who was your father, where you born, where you are from. This kind of question requires so many advocacy, so many this kind of debate, to listen to each other and to really question the accountability, transparency, and how we can do this transformation in a proper manner instead of reproducing the exploitation.
Thank you. How about our other contributors? Any thought, anything you would like to add in relation to that?
Yes,
Anila,
I just.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I just want to say from, I think Anila summed it out really beautifully, this aspect. I think there should be much more done at the policy level that really cascades down to the grassroots here on the ground when we are really supporting these really vulnerable women in terms of integration, the different aspects. So as always, there's so much we can do, and we should be much more vocal at the policy level.
Ms. Yadviga, you particularly highlighted some very good examples of what that looks like in practice. In your opinion, what has really worked on the ground in order to make that happen?
It's really bringing the people together. For example, bringing the community leaders at one table, bringing the decision makers. The most important thing is bringing the decision making who makes this kind of level, the donors, the governments. That's what we're trying to do here. And of course, it's a slow process. There's everywhere else in the world, bringing people together to allow this kind of space to discuss this, but at the same time, being very much aware that we have to preserve the identity of minorities, not to put them into one side. I think intercultural education is really the key, as like a starting point for the development of intercultural competencies and social cohesion.
And do you find the community receptive to that, just from the context of the Jordanian, which I know is quite different to here in terms of what acceptance means?
It's true, as we have had a previous discussion with you, Amina, that luckily here, of course, it's very different in Middle East, but in Jordan, it's the government and the community are quite welcomed. They're welcoming the refugees and migrants. So I feel this is the right space to really work with the government, to really, because they're very much open to negotiation and to really improve the situation and integrate the refugees in the communities. But there's so many aspects in terms of funding, in terms of the commitment, the policy level. So there is so much it should be still done. But in Jordan, it is at least, I'm very proud and happy to say that at least in Jordan, they're very much welcoming.
Indeed, and that's
open
very encouraging.
open to much more intercultural dialogue.
And many of us are very much encouraged to hear that, especially when there's still so much fear, misconception and division that arises as a result of that. Dr. Salome, you had some thoughts. Please do share.
I was a little bit conscious about policies because I'm also aware that, migrant and refugees are not a homogeneous group. So they are in different, they actually own different immigration status. And when we are talking about it, I hear what Noah is saying and Yadviga, but we, for example, here in Ireland, we have program refugees, but we also have people who come on their own seeking international protection. And actually the way they are treated is very different from how program refugees are treated. And you'll find that, the policies that we have in place, do not actually take into consideration about this immigration status of different people who end up seeking this international protection or who end up in the country as refugees and migrants. So it's very important that, when we are trying to talk about policies, we also take into account their policies for who, for which migrant, for which, is it for the people seeking international protection and whose actually rights are taken off completely because they are still pending. We also have undocumented people, in particular women trafficked, for the purpose of sexual exploitation. This morning I was in a meeting talking about that and the importance of letting those people talk and also inform the policy and be on the table. So it's very, very important that we also understand about this immigration status and how it impacts on different groups and the policies that we also have into place. So I was very much conscious about that, and then putting women into this and their vulnerability. For example, we are talking about World Refugee Day, which was yesterday, celebrating today. On the 19th, we also had the International Day for Elimination of conflict-related sexual violence. And still, we still have women who have not been heard, who have not been supported, and they are living in Europe. Still, they are not out there because we are also using international policies and national policies to look at maybe people who are in the country, generalizing them regardless of where they're coming from, or we look at, people who need these policies to be applied to them, like they are people who are very far away from us. So it's very important to try and bring everything together and take into account on whom do we talk about. When we talk about migrant or refugees, whom are we leaving out? Because definitely there are those who are left behind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And indeed, actually relating to that was a question around what are the challenges that you have encountered in lobbying your advocacy to the policymakers, knowing that the majority of the policymakers are male dominated? What would you say to that?
I respond?
Please, whoever feels ready to respond.
Yes. Male domination is indeed in everywhere. We can't ignore. But the thing is that in Europe, it's become, as I said earlier, it's become more complex, and it is there. And it's not even dominance of male, it's dominance of patriarchy, it's dominance of capitalism, it's dominance of all our stereotypical images when we are talking about this policy. Sometimes if we want to challenge that, we think if we become more aggressive, maybe we can change. But it's not about aggressiveness or radical. It's about how we can create more openness, flexibility in these policies. On the name of systematic way, on the name of system, on the name of operation, they have been saying no. You can't become a elected member of European Parliament. You can't become a policy advisor, you can't become an engineer, you can't become a doctor, because you need to have this set of list. And being a migrant woman, coming from the migration background, we always be given a role to play, a role to act, just expectation from us. And similar happening in the policies and this system. And it's easy for those people who already have the privilege of education, privilege of languages, privilege to travel, privilege to be there on right time, right place. So this is, indeed, it is man-made kind of world. I do not hate men, so please just not. But still, it is reality. We are living in so much capitalist, so much practical and non-practical policies, and we need also recognize the colonization. It still exists in the Europe. We really need to admit it. We really need to convince, yes, it is, and how we can make it more inclusive. And we really need to restart the whole system.
Indeed. And Ms. Yadviga, whilst I was listening to Ms. Anila, I was thinking of the Middle Eastern context. It must be even tougher. What are your experiences in relation to that question?
It's exactly. It's very tough. It's very difficult, and as you can imagine, it's going to be a very long process. I can tell you more about, like, for example, even me being as a woman, as a white woman, working here, managing the program for vulnerable communities. It's tough, and to negotiating as well sometimes with the key stakeholders. And with the government bodies, it's not easy. So it should be more, there's a process, of course, and could be more done in terms of really including women at the decision-making level with regards to policy implementation, and of course at the government levels. But it is here in Middle East context, it's very different than in Europe. So if we're saying that in Europe it is tough, for us here, it's a long way. Unfortunately.
Are you seeing any progress?
Of course, there is a progress, but it's so small. It's very sadly, it's very little. There's so much needs to be done. Yeah, unfortunately, this side is not very positive.
Thank you. And Dr. Salome, is there any other thoughts you'd like to add in response to this particular question?
Yes, we really still operating through patriarchy, society. And last year, 2020, I actually engaged to become a senator in Ireland. So I was contesting to become one of the senators, to be in the parliament, because I want to make change there. And I would have been the very first migrant woman in this country to become a senator. But that did not work. And I tell you the truth, the battle is crazy, because you're fighting. It's like almost physical fights to be able to get this position. Indeed, it's very, very male dominated. When you talk about political participation and, making all these decisions, they are very male dominated. And so I really encourage and hope that, for example, in Ireland, they've spoken about the quota system. So coming up with affirmative actions to ensure that, women in particular participate. And I've been questioning, I go back actually to our umbrella organization here called the National Women Council of Ireland, that who will be in this 40 quota system, because it really needs to reflect on the diversity of the society. So it should have also, migrant women and also a representative of those migrant women as well, and people from other background or discriminated areas. So it's very important that, we advocate for this, and we continue to advocate for affirmative actions to ensure that, we as migrants engage in those spaces so that we bring the experiences and issues that are affecting migrants, whether it's refugees or, other migrant women into the discussions.
Thank you. I see that we've been hearing quite a lot about policy and policy participation, and all in very kind of different contexts, but again very similar in terms of an almost urgent need for that to change in order for us to move towards a positive direction. And my question really to every single one of you is, Can you provide some very specific but maybe simple recommendations of how that can be achieved, and how can you refer to best practices that you are aware in your either national or local level? So let's start with you, Anila.
Yes, sure. I love to start always. I think it's just admit, as a European newcomer, we are trying to create some kind of platform synergy, like we need to rebuild our home, which is happening in Europe. It's very easy for European donors and funders and international actors. They think we need to go and to developing countries. We need to go to global south, and they're ignoring the Europe, and Europe becoming more and more complex. Because this sort of mentality or mindset, they don't think we need to invest to restart the function in Europe. So how we can restart the function in Europe is really needed. And this is the time. Pandemic give us so much experience. Like when pandemic hits, they don't wait. They don't see if you're a woman of color, if you're a man, if you're a child. Pandemic is pandemic for everyone. But who gets cure, who get the vaccine, it gave you the privilege. So we really need to learn how we can understand the problem, how we can cope together and grow together to restart the future of Europe. This is still in our hand. Otherwise, we can't have this kind of dialogue anymore. It becomes more difficult.
Indeed, thank you. Dr. Salome, I see on my screen.
Yes, I just actually, want to also affirm what Noah is saying, but also that, as migrant women and myself as a migrant woman, that we have to take it as our responsibility as well to be able to get there, so it doesn't matter how long it will take us, but we cannot keep on saying it. Even though we can do it, we also need that support. So the advocacy and campaign need to be huge, and also to engage with the indigenous community and in particular women, because I find it in my network, the network of migrant women, that, women are able to buy into the experiences of discrimination and what is going on, among other refugees. I would say from my organization, we learned that, we are always asked to justify the magnitude of the problem and the prevalence of the problem by showing statistics, and how bad is the problem. Even for policymakers or for politicians, if you want to win anything, you have to be able to produce something to show how serious the problem is. And so from my organization, for example, we have researched a lot on issues of mental health among refugees and migrant women. And so that helps us to lobby and campaign for changes and for better policies to be put into place. Also, the treatment and the situations of women seeking international protection and refugee women and how they are isolated and discriminated, or also issues of racism and discrimination. So research have helped us to be able to move a little bit, because we use those statistics and data to be able to argue our case. But also it's important that we also put ourselves forward when positions comes, as migrants, as refugees, to be able to sit in those positions of decision making. So I think that's the only way that things will move. But also asking, our people who are helping us, whether they are the indigenous, to also give us the space to be able to speak and to be able to contribute.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly, just to add, and what I've previously mentioned, that the government and the agencies must really invest in the awareness raising and comprehensive initiative, like through different, like for example, through media and schools, different integration projects. And also, like echoing previously, intercultural education is really, really important and crucial from my side. It's really a starting point for the development of this kind of intercultural competences and the social cohesions. I mean, some of the plan must consider different needs of different social groups and the changes in the current social and legal frameworks necessary to make the way through, of course, the integration and social cohesion.
Thank you. Very true as well. There's a question around discrimination, right? Let me actually go to another one, because I think this will be an important one, and it's in the mind at the forefront of many of us minds still. How has the development of #BLM and the discussion of hearing women that you have had over the last year? I mean, I know, for instance, for you, Yadviga, whilst you're in Jordan, there are still some conversations around that. So please do also feel very much welcome to respond to that if you feel to.
Exactly, it's very in this side. There's not much progress has been done or have achieved, unfortunately. So this is very much in progress. Agencies coming together, working to address it, but at the same time, even though we are in protracted crisis here in Jordan, there's a different needs and aspects that, of course, agencies like us have to cover, and it is it's very much in process, sadly.
Thank you. And I wonder what's going on in Dublin. I mean, I know that there was quite a lot of debate in Dublin around the whole Black Lives Matters hashtag. What's the current situation? Could you respond to that briefly, Dr. Salome?
Yes, it's last year when George Floyd died, it's actually generated a debate all over the world, and Ireland was not excluded from that. But actually, towards of last year, we also had another George Nikecho, shot to death here by one of the police. And so that ended a lot of trauma and triggered the anger which was there at the May 2020 when George Floyd was then shot. So there've been a lot of issues going on. The case of this George Nikecho is being investigated at the moment, so it's taken by the investigator. But still, issues of racism and discrimination are there. They're embedded into the society. You still find that you get to meet people with the deep-rooted attitude, racist attitude, actually, everywhere you go, and those prejudices still remain there. So my organization have been working towards addressing what we call unconscious bias, because all of us has unconscious bias, but also trying to bring people together to form a strategic alliance. So we have an alliance which actually people will see from our website. It's called www.akido.ie. I'll put it on the chat. We have a community alliance against racism, where actually we are encouraging young people from indigenous and from migrant community and from all walks of life to come and actually advocate for challenging racism into our own community. So it's still there, it's embedded in institutions, it's there individually, people still continue to experience it, but it's our problem. It's a societal problem, not individual problem, that all of us should fight against. And this is actually where my organization is coming from. We are working on that and we are on it. I think it's a disease that we need all of us, or all over the world, we need to fight, because it's in all societies of the world.
Indeed, indeed. And this unconscious bias is certainly something that seems to be coming to the surface right now, especially in the form of training and workshops where different communities are coming together and actually explore what unconscious bias is about and how that impacts, you know, our views about others, about our community and about the society in which we live. And so thank you very much for shedding a light on that particular bit. Is there anything you would like to add, Ms. Anila?
Yes, I would like to two main points. Because of pandemic, now we are vaccine transition, and I really want to emphasize, we as a migrant refugee-led initiative, we are facing different kind of problem, and that's why we launch our campaign, Vaccine for All for Vaccine. And what does this mean? As we said, we really want to make sure everyone is getting vaccine and everyone is getting information about vaccine. And we want to generate, not to create more discrimination in the society, not to want the reproduction of exploitation. So that's why we launched this campaign. This is one point, and I'm gonna share in the chat, which I am trying to share the information. And about we didn't touch upon in our discussion is about digitalization, artificial intelligence. We really want to think about those realities which are happening, because as a activist, as a feminist, sometimes it gives me a little bit worry the way we are responding to digitalization, to making artificial intelligence in our policy. Is giving an element to remove the humanity for whole setup. So that's why it's really important. Women, they face the challenge how even to use Zoom link or Skype, and how everything become online. They have the pressure to look on their child, their work at home the same time, and this barrier becoming more and more visible for them, and it's happening in Europe. So that's why I just in the last moment want to invite all of you to keep in touch, create more collaboration and synergy, because there's so much we need to contribute and to discuss. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you very much, Ms. Anila, and I certainly echo your sentiment. Our 90-minute webinar had flew by because of the inspiring contribution from every single one of you, and hearing your context and the brilliant work that you are doing so effortlessly. We've got 2 minutes left, but it just gives me a real great pleasure in saying once again, thank you so much for all that you have given and for all the contribution. I mean, one of the things that has really come up today in this conversation is the need for a more jointed approach, and one that's intentional around coordination and working together in order to strengthen communities and to move forward in a positive light. The other thing that I seem to have been hearing quite a lot is the strategic approach and plans that we need to put into place if things are to change. That whilst some of the challenges that we heard will be with us for a long time, but nevertheless there is hope. And today you are certainly have highlighted that the hope is in every single one of us, and you have certainly given us hope with so much of your contribution and the practical steps that you are taking to overcome the challenges. You talked about courageous women. You are the courageous women. You are the brilliant women, and you are the resilient women who are doing all this extraordinary work in a way that seems so effortless, but yet clearly has so much inspiring and so much input to be on. So I thank you very much for all that you've given. I also want to say thank you very much to my colleague Johannes for working so tightly in the background, making sure that he was able to send me all the wonderful questions that came forward to you, and also to all those who've been doing the technical hosts on behalf of Network for Dialogue. I thank you every single one of you in the audience who've managed to join us today and who's really given us this fruitful thought. And for us, so we have much work to do, and there is a lot to reflect on. So I wish you all well, and I hope, and we all hope to be connected, that this will just scratch the surface, and I hope this will be one of many conversations. Just to say that, as you all know, this webinar has been recorded, so it will be made available to all those who want to access it in the next couple of days. So please stay in tune. I wish you all a good evening, afternoon, wherever you are. I wish you well. Bye-bye for now.